All right, good afternoon, everyone. Joseph Greger, and I'm with Defense Contract Audit Agency. I'm the Small Business Program Manager, and in coordination with the Navy Office of Small Business Programs, we bring to you today this first in a series of Facebook Live events. And again, I'm really excited to be here. This is actually my first event, or my first Facebook Live event. And again, just really excited to do this. I have a couple of shorter presentations available to go over. And just to let everyone know, the presentations are available on the Navy website. Destiny will post that link right there in the window. So if you have a chance to go there, download the presentations, and then if you'd like, you can just follow along with me. That's what I'll probably end up doing, is just going through the different slides. So we'll do that. So I'll just give it maybe a minute for that. Just a little bit about myself. I originally grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I'm a big Steelers fan. Started working with DCAA back in 2003, so it's been about 17 years. Started off as an auditor, then supervisor, and then branch manager. And then 2 years ago, in April 2018, I rotated into this position, which is the small business program manager position for the agency. And so my sole focus is to help small businesses understand what the requirements are. The FAR and DFARs can be fairly challenging to navigate, and so I do my best to help you guys out, because we realize that small businesses do have an additional challenge for the fact that you have limited resources, and that you have and that you're small. You don't have a big contracting group to do everything. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I know as we go through, you guys may have questions. I'll do my best to answer the questions, so you can go ahead and type those in. I may not get to every question, especially if we get a lot of them. But I will let you guys know that all the questions that we do get, I'll answer those personally, and then we'll post those up somewhere. I think maybe on the either the Navy website, or maybe perhaps on YouTube as well. I do know that this video will get posted to YouTube. So it'll be there indefinitely, I guess. So if you ever need to refer to it, that'd be a great place to go to. And then also, too, I do want to plug our DCAA's public website, www.dcaa.mil. There you can also get the presentations that I'm going over today, as well as other presentations that I do. I do many of them. I do several of them. And so I do recommend going there and checking that out whenever you have a moment. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So if you're fortunate enough to have the slides in front of you, the first one I'm going to go over. I'm going to talk a little bit about DCAA, sort of an introduction to DCAA, and kind of a brief overview. So again, if you're not familiar with DCAA, it stands for Defense Contract Audit Agency. We're a government agency under DoD. We were established in 1965 by transferring all of the existing services, or the existing functions, from all of the other services. So prior to 1965, some of you may be aware, all of the services had their own contract and audit functions. And they all did things differently. They had all their own sets of policies and procedures, and as you know, that could be very, very cumbersome, and you get a lot of inconsistency. So I think it was either 1962 or 1963, the Secretary of Defense at the time said, hey, let's have this study to determine, should all of these functions be combined into one organization? And the result of that study was, yes, in fact, it is more efficient to combine all those functions into one organization. And then in 1965, that's when DCAA came about. We are the result of that study. So we do have a question here. about the slides. How can I get the slides to follow along? So Destiny, if you would, I appreciate. Could you post where folks can get that slide? I know it's on your public website, I believe, but if you can post that link and then people can go there and just follow along. All right, so that'd be great. Appreciate it. Um, again, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Again, if you're fortunate enough to have the slides, I'm gonna talk about our agency mission. So it's as a key member of the government acquisition team, we are dedicated stewards of taxpayer dollars who deliver high quality audits and services to ensure that the taxpayers get what they need. I apologize, to ensure that the warfighter gets what they need at fair and reasonable prices. If we go back in the first sentence, key acquisition, a key member of the acquisition team. A lot of people might think, well, that's just government. Okay, that's the contracting officer. That could be DCAA, what have you. But in fact, the reality of it is, I consider small businesses, I consider really any contractor as part of that acquisition team, and especially small businesses because of the work that you do. I acknowledge that small businesses it is a key component to this. You guys deliver, innovative products. You come up with sort of innovative solutions to some of the most challenging things that we have in our country. So I do consider small businesses as part of that acquisition team. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and move forward. And it looks like Sasha did upload the slide or included the link for the slides. So if you guys, it'd be great if you go there and pick up the slides. But I'm gonna go ahead and move forward. If we look at DCA now, what does the agency look like now? So we're about 4,600 employees. I wouldn't say we're a large organization, but about 4,600 employees. We have over 300 offices across the country. We do have one office overseas, over in Germany. We have one office, Wiesbaden, Germany. And then we also have one office in Hawaii. And I can tell you that, ever since I learned about that office, I've been trying to transfer there ever since. But luckily I was transferred to this position, and I've been enjoying it so far. So anyway, some of the other responsibilities and duties that we perform, we have what's called, obviously we're an audit agency, so we have auditors that perform all required or needed audits for DoD. We also have what's called Financial Liaison Advisors, or FLA for short, and they provide accounting services. They really work behind the scenes and work with our customers, and really they're more of an internal function that you guys may not really see, but they're there, they're doing their job, and they actually help sort of lubricate the gears, if you will. And so a lot of things that you do see, it was because of the FLAs. I also want to point out that we actually do work for non-DoD agencies. So, for example, if NASA wants an audit or some sort of service, or Department of Energy, or Department of State, oftentimes they will come to DCA and ask for an audit or some sort of financial advisory service, which is really a non-audit service. And if that's the case, then that occurs on a reimbursable basis. So, what does that mean to you as a small business? Well, if you have, for example, a contract with NASA or a non-DoD agency, understand that you may be involved in a DCA audit because that customer, that buying command, for whatever reason, reaches out to DCAA and requests an audit. So, if that's the case, then obviously you would be subject to a DCA audit, and so knowing some of this information, I think, could be helpful for you guys. All right, so let's move on. So the next slide really talks about, or really shows, the DoD organization and where DCA falls within the DoD. And so as you can see, we fall under the authority, direction, and control of the Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller. All right, and then obviously right next to us there within the organization are the service organizations. You have Air Force, Army, you have Navy, we also have DCMA. All right, I always like to refer to DCMA as our sister agency, If you don't know, DCMA stands for Defense Contract Management Agency, and they perform a lot of the administrative functions of a contract, like closing out the indirect rates and maybe modifying the contract, those kinds of things. Okay, now the purpose of this slide, or the reason why we're organizationally independent, is because of our auditing standards. So every audit that we perform, we must follow strict audit standards, audit guidelines, and the standards that we follow are contained in what's called GAGAS, G-A-G-A-S. We also refer to that as Yellow Book, and that stands for government accepted, generally accepted government auditing standards. And so one of the standards that we must follow is the independence. So we have to be independent in fact, independent in appearance, and also independent organizationally, because ultimately our audit report goes to all the buying commands, and they actually make decisions on whether they want to award contracts or not. So that's where we have the independence. We audit the organization, the contractor, we provide an opinion, and then ultimately somebody else makes a decision on whether they want to award you the contract or whether they want to determine your accounting system's adequate, so on and so forth. So, we are not, DCAA isn't the judge and the jury as well in this, right? We actually provide, we're actually an advisory agency really to a lot of the buying commands. Okay, so, I see we don't really have any questions, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on. The next slide really shows DCAA's organization at a very high level. Our director currently is Ms. Bales. Our deputy is Joe Bentz. So if you were wondering, I actually work out of the operations group, which is a headquarters function. And as you can see there, we have the operations, we have headquarters. We have HR, we have policy, and we also have quality. We're also organized by region. So we have technically we have 3 regions. We have Eastern, Central, and Western. We also have a 4th region we call FD, which is field detachment. FD audits classified contracts. So if you don't have any classified contracts, then you don't need to worry about them. They won't be auditing you. But more than likely, if you're within the sort of the DC area, Northern Virginia area, Maryland area, and you're a small business, you will most likely fall, well, not most likely, you will definitely fall under the Eastern region. That is our geographical area. But I do realize Facebook Live here, we might have people from all over the country or all over the world tuning in. If you go ahead and flip over to the next slide, that really shows all the regions on a more of a geographical map. Okay, and so if you look there, you can see Eastern region is sort of sort of like a purplish color there. Then you have the Central region, which is sort of like an orange, and then Western region there is in green. We also have what's called Corporate Audit Directorates, or CAD for short, CAD. And so DCA decided to organize around our large defense contractors, like the Boeings and the Lockheeds of the world. And so again, a small business, you don't really need to worry about that aspect of our organization, because those are for the large major contractors. Again, if you're a small organization, you're going to fall within one of the regions, okay, whether it's Eastern, Central, or Western. Okay, so one question I get, just as a sidebar, one question I get is, hey, who is my cognizant DCAA office? Well, so the answer is it's going to really depend on where your accounting records are located. But the best way to find out is you can either contact me, or you could use our public website. Again, that's www.dcaa.mil. We have a function there. When you go there, you can actually look up, and find who your cognizant DCAA office is. So if you don't want to do that, you can always give me a call, and I could look up that information for you as well. So speaking of our public website, if you just go ahead and turn to the next page, it actually shows you our public website, and it shows you there under the Locator tab. That's where you can go and find your cognizant DCAA office. All right, when you go there, you can just enter in your cage code or your DUNS or your zip code, and then one of those should work. And when you hit enter, hopefully at least it should bring up who your office is. Okay. And again, like I said, if you can't find it, sometimes it may not work. The reason why it may not work is if you're a new small business and you haven't had any previous work, or you haven't, let's say all you have is fixed price work, or you've only been a subcontractor, then there's really no reason for DCAA to come in and do an audit. Then we're not going to have any information on you. So that may be the case. Usually that is the case. And if you try going to our website, then you may not have any luck finding your office. So I would recommend just to go ahead and just shoot me an email or give me a call if that's the case. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on here. The next slide. So just for those, if you want to know, I'm on slide number 10. All right. This slide here really shows the DCAA services throughout the phases of an award. So if you kind of break down the contract phase between pre-award or prior to contract award, and then you have during the execution of the contract, and then you have completion of the contract. So those are three areas, and we get a lot of questions, or at least I get a lot of questions from people in general asking, hey, generally speaking, what is the work that you do? What's the bulk of the work that you do? Well, overwhelmingly, the bulk of the work that we do is going to fall into two categories. It's going to be incurred cost, and then it's going to be forward pricing, or just pricing demand work that we get. So if you think about the pre-award stage or prior to contract award, the two main audits that DCAA could perform is the pre-award accounting system audit, right? And then also we could also perform a proposal audit. So if you submit a cost and pricing proposal to the government, whether it's fixed price, whether it's cost reimbursable, DCAA could be involved in doing some work there if requested by the contracting officer. So just realize that. And then throughout the contract, assuming you get awarded the contract, you're working on the contract, you're delivering, DCAA may do some audit services as well. Sort of the most notable, if you will, is going to be the incurred cost proposal audit. As you know, that is a requirement as part of the cost and payment clause. If you have any cost reimbursable type contracts or subcontracts, you're actually required to submit what's called an incurred cost proposal. I just want to point out, you may see there on that list CAS compliance and also business systems audits. Just wanted to let you guys know, as a small business, you are exempt from CAS and from business systems. Okay, and then finally, when we talk about the completion of the contract, or at the end of the contract, DCAA could be involved, perhaps doing the final voucher, or maybe even termination. Okay, so let's go move forward on slide 11. Slide 11 shows all of the presentations that are available, that are currently available. And so they're out there on our public website, available to you. If for whatever reason down the road, if you ever need to refer to something, I highly recommend going there. The presentations are very informative, and they go into sort of all the criteria, and it sort of explains why. Why does DCAA ask for certain things? Well, it's not because we want to, but it's because it's what the regulations are, and it's what the regulations say. So these are actually excellent presentations, and also, I guess, just to let you guys know, in the upcoming Facebook Live sessions, I'll be doing the accounting system presentation. So if you're a new small business and you want to make sure you have a good accounting system in place, go ahead and tune into that. I'll be talking about accounting system presentations and all of the requirements that you must meet to be considered adequate. All right. So let's move forward. The next slide there really shows additional resources available to you as a small business. If you can see, or if you have the slide in front of you, you can see that DCAA likes checklists. We have a lot of checklists here. Just to give you an example, we do have a pre-award accounting system checklist. So if you want to see kind of at a very high level what you need to have for your accounting system, you can go there and just pick up that checklist. The next slide, again, shows our public website. under the Customer tab and then under the Guidance tab, that's where you can see a lot of the different resources that we have. CAM and MRDs and CAS and FAR and DFARs. So I really recommend going there. If you're not familiar with FAR and DFARs, I would highly recommend going there and checking it out. Okay. All right, so then I'm on slide 14 under the Customers tab, and then the Checklists and Tools. That's where I mentioned you can find all the checklists for various different things, including, accounting system, proposal, incur cost, so on and so forth. And then specifically for small business, under the Customer tab, and then when you go to the Small Business link there, there's a specific page just for small business. On that page, that is where the presentations are located. So all the presentations that I mentioned earlier, they're actually located there on that page. Okay. The other important thing too is to keep in mind, there's a generic number, but there's a number there, a phone number, which comes to me. All right. So if you ever need to contact me, if you want to give me a call, I give this number a call. It comes directly to me. And then also too, if you want to email me, if you have any questions, you want to email me. There's a generic email as well, and that comes directly to me. So again, I recommend you go in there. At the very least, go there, write the number down, write the email down, and at least you have it for future reference. Okay. So that really takes me to the end of the intro presentation. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and give some of you guys an opportunity to ask any questions. I see here we really haven't had any questions come through. I'm just going to take a look real quick. I don't think I have any questions here, but I'll just give it maybe 10 seconds or so to see if we have any questions. If you do, go ahead and type them in, and I'd be happy to address them. Okay. All right. So I guess you guys are all. I guess I've done such a great job. You don't have any questions for me. All right. So then I'll monitor that as we move forward. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next topic. And again, I do recommend, if you haven't done so, Sasha has included a link there to provide the presentations that I'm going over today. So if you'd like to go ahead and pick up the presentations, and you can follow along. All right. So the next topic I'm going to go over is audit process. All right. So I get a lot of questions from small businesses, and they say, "Hey, what is the audit process? What can I expect? DCAA comes by and knocks on my door and says, "Hey, we want to do an audit. What should I expect from DCAA? What kind of information should I provide? Or as a general question, what is the audit process? Or probably the biggest question I get is, how do I request an audit? How do I get DCAA to come out and actually do an audit?" And so those are all very important questions, and hopefully we could answer those during this segment. So let me go ahead and address probably the most requested question, or the most asked question that I get is, can I request DCAA to come in and do an audit? Come into my company and do an audit? Unfortunately, the answer to that question is we don't respond to contractor requests for audits. So typically, what happens is, and I'll use an accounting system is the example. Let's say you're a small business and you want to submit a proposal to an award, and let's say it's a cost reimbursable type contract. If you are being considered for that contract, if the contracting officer is going to consider awarding you this contract, then typically what happens is he or she, the contracting officer, will reach out or should reach out to DCAA and request an audit. So DCAA only responds to government requests for an audit. So that's generally what happens. I don't want to say that should happen all the time. Contracting officers have warrants. Ultimately, they're the ones that, work contracts. There are some situations where they may have information on file for you, and they may decide, not to request an audit because, maybe they have enough information to assess your accounting system. or maybe an accounting system was done recently. Who knows, right? There's all kinds of reasons, but just understand, it's not set in stone that a contracting officer should request an audit. So it looks like we do have some questions here. So we do have a question here from Randy, and hopefully it's okay if I say your name. Randy here says that he's a new business, he's starting from scratch, and he wants to support DoD, and he's asking for the top three recommendations, for accounting system platforms is basically what he's asking for. And I would say that's probably either the second or third most question that I get. I'll get a lot of new businesses, say, hey, what do you recommend, in terms of platform, in terms of software. I'll even get questions about, hey, I'm looking for a consultant. Who do you recommend? Again, unfortunately, we don't recommend any consultants. We don't recommend any particular platforms or software. What we recommend is understanding what the criteria says. If you understand what the DFARS criteria say, then quite honestly, you can use pretty much anything. If you tailor it to meet the criteria, you can really use anything that's out there, right? So that, to me, that's really the key, is understanding what the criteria is, and then whatever software or whatever platform you decide to use, make sure that the functions meet the requirements, and that the system itself can actually perform what you're required to do. And if that happens, then, like I said, I think honestly you can use anything. And so that's what I tell people for that. All right. So all right. So Ann here has a great question. What is the timeline for a small business to receive a pre-award accounting system audit? So I'm taking that question in a couple of different ways. I'll answer what I think you're asking. So if a contracting officer reaches out to DCAA and say, hey, I have a small business here, I'm considering awarding them this contract, can you perform an audit? If that happens, let's say that happens today, in my experience at least, or I can only speak for my experience in like I said, prior to this I was a branch manager. So I have a lot of experience with dealing with contracting officers, asking for audits. We generally make that a top priority, and when we get a request coming in from a contracting officer, we will work towards addressing that, and we generally follow up with the contracting officer within a day or two. We may ask for some clarifying information, and then I would say within a week or so, we're contacting the contractor. At the most a week or so, we're contacting the contractor, letting them know that we've been requested to perform this audit, and we're getting that process started. Again, there's no hard and fast rule to this. That's been my experience. Quite often it's been probably less than a week or so, but every office is going to be slightly different. Obviously with the resources that are available at the office, with other priority work that we have. But I would generally say maybe within about a week, the small business should know that DCA wants to come out and perform an audit. The second part to that, once we initiate the audit with the contractor, the other question I get sometimes too is how long is the audit? How long does a pre-award audit take? And again, that's going to vary. It's going to vary from contractor to contractor, from office to office. But again, in my experience, when I was a branch manager, we were performing audits. We were performing pre-award audits at contractor locations in about, I want to say 50, 55, maybe 60 days. And again, that's going to vary. It's going to vary from office to office. But for me, in my experience, I want to say it was about, let's just say 60 days or less. All right, so that's a great question, and I appreciate that. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Oh, we do. Okay, so this is a lengthier question. I'm going to go ahead and table that for now. I need to read it and kind of process it, but let me go ahead and move through this because I think we have about 20 minutes or so. I'm going to go ahead and move through this second presentation, and then if we have time at the end, let me go ahead and address this question that Leah has. All right, if I can't address it during this live event, then I will definitely answer your question offline. If you want to contact me, we can talk offline. And then I think all the questions will be posted somewhere, and I'll have a response for those. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so audit process. I talked a little bit about the audit process. If you're following along with me with the presentation on slide number 2, that's a quick little sort of agenda there, kind of what we're going to talk about. Adequacy reviews. Communication is huge, at least with me, and we should have a lot of those throughout the audit. We talk a little bit about site visits and then also about requests for information. Okay. All right, so really the first thing before DCAA performs an audit, really the first thing that we need to have in place is what's called an adequate submission. All right, so because the submission or the assertion is really what we're auditing. So let's use the accounting system as an example. So if we're coming out to perform a pre-award accounting system audit, really the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to ask the contractor to provide what's called their assertion. Their assertion really is going to be the pre-award accounting system checklist. And the checklist really is a self-certification of your accounting system and how it meets the 18, there's 18 DFARS criteria if we're talking about a DoD contract. So really that's the first step, is we need to have a good assertion, an adequate assertion, before we start the audit. Okay, so if we're talking, that's one example. If we're talking about an incurred cost, before we start an audit, we need to have an adequate incurred cost proposal. All right, so that's really the first thing. Once we have an adequate assertion or an adequate proposal, so once we have that, really the first initial communication that you're going to have from DCAA is what's called an entrance conference. Okay, you may have some communication with us before. It may be somewhat informal. It may be more or less of information gathering, or just gathering of information, gathering data, and that kind of thing. But really the first formal type of communication that you'll get from DCAA is going to be the entrance conference. And so the entrance conference typically is going to be face-to-face, in person. Usually it's going to be the DCAA auditor and the supervisor. Will come out to your location, we'll meet with you, generally the owner of the company, and then whoever else you want to have, there present at the meeting. And really the purpose of the entrance conference is really it's going to be sort of like a meet and greet, kind of get to know you a little bit. If we haven't met before, we'll do that. Or in some cases, maybe we worked with you in the past, so there really isn't anything new there. But the entrance conference really is gonna. The purpose of that really is for DCA to lay out the game plan for what we're going to do throughout the audit. When DCA performs an audit, there really shouldn't be any surprises. There's nothing for us to hide. In fact, if you go to our public website, you can actually access all of the audit programs that we have. The audit programs are standard audit programs that we use, and that is sort of the roadmap, if you will, for performing all of our audits. And that's public information, so you're more than welcome to go there, take a look at it, so that you're not surprised, right? So that you know what the roadmap is going to be. Now, understand every audit's going to be different, it's going to be unique, and the auditors will usually tailor that program. It may include some additional audit procedures or exclude some procedures and that kind of thing. But for the most part, all that information is public, it's out there. Just something to be aware of. There are on occasions we may ask the contracting officer to attend the entrance conference. It doesn't happen too often, but that is something that could happen. And generally speaking, at the larger contractors, the Boeings and the Lockheeds of the world, we generally see more attendance from the customer, from the contracting officer in those situations than we do normally with small businesses. So anyway, let's move forward. On number 5, slide 5, I kind of touched base a little bit about the entrance conference. Again, nothing really new. really no there's really nothing set in stone in terms of what we discuss with the entrance conference. But usually, the auditors will talk about the audit itself, kind of the roadmap, kind of what we're going to do. They may talk about logistical things. They may ask for maybe some space at your location so auditors can go there and actually perform some of the field work, and that kind of thing. And other logistical things, maybe getting access to the building and that kind of thing. So again, that's going to be very unique to each company, each small business. All right. Slide 6 really talks a little bit more about entrance conference. I'm not going to beat that too much. I think you guys have a good idea of what that means. So moving on, slide number 7, we talk about walkthroughs. Walkthroughs at entrance conference in some cases could be almost kind of the same. In other situations, they're very, very different. A walkthrough generally is going to consist of understanding your proposal or understanding whatever the audit objective is. So, again, let me use an incur cost proposal as an example. Let's say you submit an incur cost proposal, and we may ask for a separate meeting just to discuss the proposal itself and have you guys walk us through the proposal. We may have questions about it. There might be something we don't understand, and obviously you're the ones that put it together. You have the expertise in that area, so we may have questions throughout that particular session. In some cases, the entrance conference and the walkthrough can be the same. It can be done in the same meeting or within the same day or what have you. So again, these aren't set in stone. It's very fluid. It's going to really depend on the contractor and the situation and that kind of thing. All right. So again, I'm moving forward here. Slide number 8. So another requirement that we have, earlier I talked about our auditing standards. Another requirement that we have is what's called a notification letter. And so we're actually required to send a notification letter to the contracting officer. And within that letter, it generally contains certain information. You can take a look at the slide to see what that information is. But at the end of the day, the information that we have there notifying the contracting officer, it shouldn't be a surprise. It's all sort of public information, and it's information that we should have shared with you prior to that letter. All right, so I'm not going to really get into that too much. But just understand we do send a notification letter to the contracting officer. Okay, so moving on, obviously once we kind of get beyond sort of the beginning stages of the audit, and now we're sort of into the field work, we sort of determine what objectives we want to meet, what criteria that we're looking at, and we design audit procedures that will help assist us in making those decisions. We're going to have, obviously, interim discussion throughout this entire process. So obviously, like I said before, I think communication is extremely important, especially with small businesses. We want to keep you informed with what's going on, not just in the beginning, stages of the audit, but also throughout the stage of the audit. We want to keep you informed and communicate, with things in terms of what we're finding, what we're seeing. It's very common for auditors to, see something and maybe not understand it. They'll reach out and ask for additional questions, or they'll reach out with additional questions and seek, clarification on those things. So just understand, and I'm sure you guys agree with that as well, communication is extremely important throughout the process. So a couple of things I want to talk about. So I'm on the next slide here, number 10 and number 11. We talk about the exit conference. So, very similar to the entrance conference. The exit conference is another somewhat formal discussion that we have. Typically it takes place at the end of the audit, or I guess I should say at the end of the field work, prior to issuing the report. That's generally when it takes place. And then, the exit conference, again, generally it's face-to-face. We come to your location, we discuss, just kind of like what it says, we discuss the audit and the findings, and that's essentially what we do during the exit conference. Best case scenario, we perform the audit and we have no findings, right? We take no exception, and that's generally pretty easy, pretty straightforward. We just tell you, we didn't have any findings, right? In other situations where maybe perhaps we had findings or we had some exceptions, obviously we're going to discuss those with you. But again, during the exit conference, this shouldn't be the first time that you're hearing about it, right? So like I said before, communication is huge, it's key. We should be communicating with you throughout the audit. So, let's say during the audit, during the field work, we find something, and let's say potentially we think it's an issue, we're going to work with you. We're going to get clarifying information. We're going to ask for more data if appropriate. And throughout that process, like I said, we're going to communicate with you and let you know what we're finding. So when we come to the exit conference, there should be no surprises. DCAA and the contractors should be discussing these things throughout. And when we get to the exit conference, so let's say, for example, we have a finding during the exit conference, really that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Provided that it wasn't resolved, during the. So let me go ahead and move forward. The next couple of slides really talks about audit opinion. I'm not going to go too detailed into the audit opinion, but generally we do have 4 different types of audit opinions. We have so really the opinion that everybody loves, especially the contractors, is going to be the unqualified opinion, and that's going to be your clean opinion. So basically, we found no issues, we found no exceptions, everything looked fine, right? So that's really the goal, if you think about it. The next opinion that we can provide is really going to be the qualified opinion. And so basically what that says is the contractor's proposed amounts comply in all material respects with the terms of the contract, except for questioned amounts or except for certain procedures we can perform. So essentially what the qualified opinion says is everything looked fine except for this 1 or 2 or 3 areas that we did find exceptions to. So that's essentially what the qualified opinion is, and those exceptions can vary. They could be anything. Maybe we, let's say we performed an incur cost audit and we found costs that we determined were unallowable per a contract requirement, and so we might say something to the effect of we believe the we found the submission to be we take no exceptions except for this particular item. So that's essentially what a qualified opinion says. And then the next 2 opinions are more significant, if you will. We have what's called adverse, and then we have a disclaimer. So I'll talk about those individually. So an adverse opinion basically says the contractor's proposed amounts do not comply with solicitation terms relating to pricing. So that was the example they gave here. Essentially what an adverse opinion says is that something in your proposal did not comply with some sort of requirement. So, if I go back and use the incur cost submission, as the example, and we find, let's say amounts that we believe are unallowable. Let's say they're unallowable per FAR or per some sort of contract term, then we could potentially say, we could potentially issue an adverse opinion because maybe there were significant amounts that we found that didn't comply, right? So that is an example of an adverse opinion. So disclaimer is probably, in my opinion, probably the worst opinion that we could issue. Basically, what we're saying is we have no opinion, right? We issue a report. We did some work, but we have no opinion. And so if you think about it, our opinion, our report goes to the contracting officer, and ultimately it's for them to read the report and use that information to make decisions. Well, if we provide a report and say we have no opinion, then how does that help the contracting officer in terms of making a decision, right? If they have no, if we have no opinion, it doesn't help them make a decision. It's almost like as if we didn't even do an audit, right? So that's a very challenging situation when we have that. And generally speaking, disclaimer is a situation where perhaps maybe DCAA could not perform most or all of the audit procedures that we design for the specific audit, and there could be many reasons for that. A very easy and simple example could be, maybe we were denied access for whatever reason. We asked for data, and the contractor, for whatever reason, said, I'm not going to give you the data, or I can't find the data, or what have you, or whatever the reason is for, we couldn't review data to render an opinion, right? So that could be a situation which could lead to a disclaimer, right? So that's just one example. So the purpose of this is, I don't want to scare anybody or turn you off, but just understand, those are 4 different types of opinions that we could issue, and I just wanted to give you some insight into those and what they mean. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on. I know we are getting close to our mark here. I do have a couple more slides I want to get to, and then I just want to make sure I answer some of your questions here. Obviously, so I'm on slide 14. I talked about earlier before. During the field work, auditors, should generally go ask to come out, during the audit, during the field work. One of the things they may do is ask, hey, is there space available where I can come and sit and actually do the audit? I can look at review documents. It's very common for them to have questions. They may want to ask maybe your accountant or CPA or whoever, or maybe you have somebody in house that does sort of the accounting functions. And having access to those people is in my mind very critical, because they're the experts, and so if we have questions on something, we definitely want to be able to speak to the experts in that area. So just understand, auditors may, throughout the audit, they should coordinate with you to perform site visits and understand the purpose and the benefits of those site visits. All right, so the last slide I really have, number 15, really talks about requests for information, and so, again, this is going to vary from office to office and auditor to auditor, but, oftentimes auditors will develop or have some sort of documentation, using some sort of log to document a request for information, and so really that's just kind of a formal way of them, asking for things. When they ask for information or documentation, they generally log it, and then they track it to make sure, number one, obviously, it keeps track of all the things that we ask for, and then the other benefit to that too is, sometimes, we realize, you guys are busy, you're doing a lot of things, if we see that we haven't received the information in a timely fashion, then we'll reach out to you and just sort of remind you that, hey, we've asked for some information, and if you could, go ahead and follow up with us on that, that'd be greatly appreciated. So that's just something to kind of understand, be aware of. That's something that we do. A lot of offices do implement sort of a request log, and so generally you will see something like that come through. So that's really it. That takes me to the end of this presentation. We talked about audit process. I know I covered a lot within this hour, especially if you're very new to government contracting, or if you're very new to DCAA. I know I covered a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys allow time. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and read. We do have a couple of questions here, so I'm going to do my best to try to answer these. Let's see here. Oh, okay. So Leah, I'm going to go back to Leah's question, and it's a lengthy question. I'm going to try to paraphrase it as much as I can. Of course, you guys can see the question as well, but basically what she's asking for, the result of the DFARS case, it amended DFARS to address the requirements for additional cost appraising data, when only one offer is received? If so, has this delayed timeline in requesting and providing audit? So to answer your question, or well, I guess really the best way to answer that question is I haven't, in my capacity as the small business manager and program manager, and also as a branch manager prior to this, I haven't noticed that specific amendment to DFARS to delay timeline with respect to audits. So I haven't seen that, me personally. Obviously I can't speak for every office out there, but I will say though, in general, when DCA performs a proposal audit, a cost of pricing proposal audit, one of the delays that we do see from contractors is supporting the basis of your estimate. So, when you submit a cost proposal, one of the things that DCA looks at during the adequacy is there adequate justification for the basis of your estimate. So that's one of the things we look at, and in a lot of cases when there are delays, it's because of that. And so and the way we look at that is we look at that as an inadequate proposal. So essentially what we're saying is, the contractor hasn't adequately described or adequately included information to document or the basis of their estimate. So that's sort of how my response to that. Looks like we have some other questions here. What are some of the most common contractor mistakes that you've seen during the audit process? Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one of the most common mistakes I see is an inadequate proposal or inadequate assertion. And what we mean by that, and again, it's going to vary, from contractor to contractor, but in general, what we see is, and I'll take a pre-award as an example. A lot of times we'll get the checklist, and the checklist, the contractor will fill out the checklist, but they won't adequately describe why they're compliant. So one of the criteria is you must have some sort of timekeeping mechanism to record your time, so on and so forth. And we'll see very short or truncated responses to that. And so oftentimes we'll go back to the small businesses say, hey, we need a little bit more information here, a little bit more of a description of why, or why do you think your accounting system meets this particular criteria? So that's just one example that we generally see. So I would say that's probably one of the more common mistakes that we see. And then, okay, let's see here. Joe, thank you for taking the time to do this. Looking forward to it. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, so it does look like, I think I had about an hour. I'm about a minute and a half over. I don't see any more questions. So I do want to say, I want to take the time to say thank you to Anne and her team, and Destiny and her team for putting this together. Hopefully it was very beneficial for you guys. And again, my contact information is on the slide decks there. I encourage you to reach out if you have any questions, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Like I said, this is the first. I believe it's 3 in total. This is the first of 3. The next 2, I think I'll be going over accounting system requirements. So if you're very interested in that, I would ask to tune in. And with that, I will say goodbye, and hopefully you all stay safe. With the current environment that we're in, it's a very unprecedented time. So hopefully you guys stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.